Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, wherever you're tuning in. We are Slava and Jonathan, bringing you the Side Quest podcast, where we talk about character development, stories, and all things that are world building. And we occasionally take side quests, because, frankly, that's how conversations work. Just as a reminder, this whole show is spoiler heavy. So sit back, tune in, and join us on this episode of Side Quest. Good dark morning over there, Slava.
Our open is appropriate because where I'm sitting, it is cloudy and rainy and a little chilly, just like a Sith would like his mornings.
Mm-hmm.
Although I tried to go outside and twirl a stick really fast, and I just got wet.
As in aroused?
As in drenched in rain.
Oh. Okay. Well, that's different.
Yes.
I'm newly married. What do you want from me?
I got nothing.
That's right. Today, episode 83. Can you believe we made it 83 episodes?
I can, actually, and I'm excited.
That's not what you're supposed to say. You can't believe it. You're very impressed with us, et cetera, whatever people say.
But all those things, but I can believe that we made it to 83. I am impressed with us, and I am excited. I thought about this actually over the last few weeks, and I'm like, wow, we've almost at 100 episodes. We've done this for a year plus, recording.
Well, that's if you don't count. Yeah, that's just recording. If you don't count the mistakes we made.
We built something that's really cool that I enjoy doing every week. Whether it's the reading, putting together the outlines, the research, bantering with you, sharing our little banters with the audience. It's been a great experience. I am thrilled to be here.
It's fun.
And to do
it's a
this.
good time.
It is.
It's a fun
much so.
to read books. And I think that that's part of the audience that we speak to. And we'd like to hear your thoughts on this, but I feel like the audience that we're talking to is the people who want to talk about books with friends, but most of your friends don't necessarily read the same books. Maybe they read books. Maybe they don't. Most of my friends don't read books. And so that's why I'm here, holding a podcast where it's not quite a book club because you don't have to read along with us. You could simply just enjoy hearing about the summaries and ideas of the books that we read. So it's good times.
Yeah.
And then I tell my friends that they get to be guests on the episodes so that they will read the book before they get here. And then I know moving forward, I can talk to them about that book. It's great.
Yeah. And for a long time, we didn't tell any of our friends about any of this. Not that we didn't want them to know or listen, but we wanted to get this off the ground, see how it goes, and then slowly introduce our friends to it. Because oftentimes, like, I'm doing a thing, and then everything falls apart. Then, a month later, your friend's like, so how's your podcast going? Oh, yeah, we recorded 2 episodes, and we decided we don't want to do it anymore for whatever the reason is. So I finally told one of my friends, I think a month ago, and I think he forgot about it, but he was asking me what I was doing this weekend, and I said, I'm recording, 2 episodes, and then I'm going to be editing all of Sunday after church. I'm going to be editing some episodes that I fell behind on. And he's like, oh, yeah, that's right. You're doing a podcast, aren't you? How long have you been doing that? And I told him, he's like, why didn't you tell me earlier? I'm like, well, for the reason that I just explained to the audience, that's what I told him. And he's, no, fair enough. Like, share a link with me.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's fun. Love it. Well, before we dive in, adventurers, you know what to do. Hit that subscribe button so that you never miss a side quest.
Indeed. Well, this week's book, as you have probably noticed by the title of the episode, is Dynasty of Evil by Drew Karpyshyn. And I'm going to read us the publisher's summary of the book to get us into it. 20 years have passed since Darth Bane, reigning Dark Lord of the Sith, has demolished the ancient order devoted to the dark side and reinvented it as a circle of 2. One master to wield the power and pass on the wisdom, and one apprentice to learn, challenge, and ultimately usurp the Dark Lord in a duel to the death. But Bane's acolyte, Zannah, has yet to prove herself a worthy successor. Determined that the Sith dream of galactic domination will not die with him, Bane vows to learn the secret of a forgotten Dark Lord that will assure the Sith's immortality and his own. Xana knows that her ruthless master has begun to doubt her, and so she prepares for his downfall, plotting at last to wrest from Bane the title of Dark Lord of the Sith. Xana pursues her master from the grim depths of a ravaged world to the barren reaches of a desert outpost, where the future of the dark side will be decided by the final, fatal stroke of a lightsaber. And this book is written by Drew Karpyshyn, who is a Canadian video game scenario writer, scriptwriter, and novelist. He served as a senior writer for BioWare Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, and lead writer for the first two Mass Effect video games. And we've talked about those, how much I like them, and Matt too. He left BioWare in 2012 to focus on his Chaos-Born novels, and returned to it 3 years later in 2015. On March 9th, 2018, he announced he was leaving BioWare once again to pursue independent work. And between those times, he has written the Bane Trilogy, this one being published in 2010. Jonathan and I have thoroughly enjoyed this trilogy.
Yeah, this is the third book of the trilogy, the final. And Matt was the one who originally suggested this to us, and it's been fun. It's been a good time. I really enjoy seeing things that are outside the average Star Wars fandom for the general goer, right? Like I've seen 4, 5, and 6. I think I saw episode 2. I didn't see 1. I don't think I saw 3. But I just know enough about it. I played KOTOR for part of the game. I briefly looked at the Star Wars. That was the Star Trek Galaxy. Never mind. I played a little bit of the Star Wars games at friends' houses. I never bought them myself, but it seems like a fun IP, but I don't see them expanding the video games and movies the way that the books have the opportunity to. Books, just give us more time with the characters. Give us more time with the plot and the worlds. I guess I should call it a universe because it's not like a singular world, right? But anyway,
Yep.
We are going to do 3 episodes on Dynasty of Evil. Per usual, we'll have first half of the book with Slava and I, second half of the book with Slava and I, and then the third episode will be with our resident Star Wars expert, Matt, who recommended the series to us. Can't wait to have him back and hear about all the little details we missed, and also learn more about Star Wars as an intellectual property and universe.
Yeah, and he has some life-changing events to share with us, too.
He does.
He is also now engaged in the rule of 2. only slightly less evil and more romantic.
Well, I hope so. I hope so.
Right. There's
That's
no
funny. That was
battle
good.
to the death. Yeah, I have my moments.
Here and there.
Yeah. But I gotta say, this is my favorite book out of the series.
Why is that? That's interesting.
There just seems to be more going on. The connections between what you think are side characters to the main characters is wonderfully done, wonderfully executed. And we get more characters with specific desires. You know exactly what a character wants and what he's going after. And even those quote unquote side characters who kind of become part of the main story pretty quickly, even before half of the book is complete, you get an insight into their desires and their problems and their backstory. It's done really fast. And for those of you who are just joining us for this series with this book, or just joining us for the first time, Drew Karpyshyn wrote video game scenarios. And I've said this, you get, 10 to 40 hours to play a video game. Yeah. And in between gameplay in between the gameplay, you have, for sakes, what's the word for it?
Side quests?
No, the cutscenes. And in between the gameplay, you have cutscenes that tell the story that you are playing. And to write something that takes a person, let's just go with the high number, 40 hours to play, you might have 4 hours of cutscenes. You got to tell a big story really quickly, really well for it to make sense, even in a video game. So Karpyshyn, shout out to him again, does this wonderfully in these series. The story that he wrote for Mass Effect, why do people love Mass Effect? Because the story is amazing. That's what most of the good reviews state. If you like Mass Effect, you like the fact that it's a well-written story. And he knocks it out of the park on the third book. You would think, or maybe as a cynic, you would expect that third book, he's wrapping things up. The first two were fast. This is going to be even faster. And then checks all the boxes. Boom, story's done. Bane wins, Xana wins, who the hell cares? End of story. But not so much. He introduces new characters. He introduces new twists. He expands on things from the previous two books. He connects people from the first book that were completely minor characters in the first book. He reintroduces them with a complete story arc. In this book, dude, A+. I love it. What would you say is your favorite part of this book? Or let's start with the fact that, do you like this book better than the rest? Does anything stand out to you above and beyond of the first two introduced? What are your initial takeaways from reading this third book in the trilogy?
Yeah, so I would say that this is my second favorite book in the trilogy, and the first book would be my favorite because I enjoy origin stories more. And while Bane has developed in the first book, we saw him develop as a character. In the second book, we see him establish a new empire, basically, with the Sith, with the rule of two, which is pretty profound, I think, in a narrative setting. It's like, hey, this is the new way of doing things. And moving forward, it affects a large canon of work, which I think is pretty cool in hindsight because it was written later. But regardless, I would say that book 3, it has a more mature writing to it with more going on, just like you said. But
yeah,
I struggle with Bane's growth because it feels stagnant to me, at least for the first half of this book. Bane is single focused, and so I don't want to call him a flat character because I do believe he has other desires that are hinted at. But to me, he feels like he has plateaued a bit, where he's a toy collector of Sith knowledge and artifacts, both in book 2 and book 3, which is why I like book 1 the best. So character development wise, because I really enjoy strong characters who see growth, for positive or negative, but see growth, see change. This book feels more mature in its writing, but character growth specifically for Bane feels stagnant.
Yeah, I can see why you say that. Because for me, and I text this to you, a couple chapters in, Bane is just a grumpy boomer complaining about kids these days. And kids these days is Xana. Okay, I get it. She's not living up to your potential, or you're having second thoughts, you're having doubts. And this is not a critique of Drew Karpyshyn or the writing style or that he chose to make him this way. This is just me talking to the
Just
character
Bane,
or about the
right.
character. Just Bane in world. Like, shut up, dude. He just seems to be that old guy that collects trinkets and is angry. And obviously, he's a Sith. He's going to be angry. He's going to be disappointed with Xana for not reaching the potential that he wants her to reach as the Dark Lord of the Sith. But it just comes off to me as just a grumpy boomer complaining about millennials buying avocado toast bread or whatever the hell they buy. We buy because we're millennials,
that's
technically.
True. I would say that the reason he feels like that is we haven't seen him do other adventures. Or go on other adventures. We haven't seen Bane living out his purpose of establishing the Sith. We haven't seen him undermining a small government on a third world area, whatever. We've only seen him execute on the rule of two in book 2, and now the extension of the rule of two, which is when he's supposed to be overthrown in this book. And I get that, but it almost feels like there should be a 5-part series where books 2 and 4 are showing us side adventures or side tasks that he goes on. Or perhaps it's books 3 and 4 where Xana's with him because there's like a 10-year time frame, right? Or is it 20 years? 10 years? 20 years. 20 years. You said that earlier.
20 years now.
20 years. Where we see them doing stuff, right? Because then it doesn't feel like, well, all we see Bane do is establish the rule of 2 and collect trinkets.
Right, absolutely. And you said something profound, which is he establishes the rule of 2. Fast forward 20 years, he's collecting trinkets. We don't get to see him topple governments, or we don't get to see the consequences of all his machinations and his connections. And he has connections because he's set up on this new planet with Xana, and they're supposedly brother and sister, and they're kind of interwoven into this planet's society, and they're all known as purveyors of fancy things, and they're involved in some of the criminal elements of the world. They're involved in some of the more affluent elements of the world. And that's all great. That's part of the ruse. But we don't see him acting like a Sith in his pursuit of the destruction of the Jedi.
Right. Executing on the other parts of his character that we've been made aware of like, why do the Sith exist? The Sith exist to try to take over the universe, which means the downfall of the Jedi. We don't see that stuff, at least in the first half of this book. I'm only halfway through, but we should. Anywho, that's why book 3 is my second favorite in the trilogy rather than book 1. Because I think book 1 does a great job establishing the origin. Book 3, we've seen the execution of things because it's a more mature writing style. And I really do like book 2. If you go back and listen to it, you can hear my qualms with it. But Bane doesn't do a whole lot in book 2. So that one sits as the third favorite of the trilogy for me.
No, that makes sense. And I remember you mentioning that. And I guess him sitting around not doing anything is possibly why he's now just a collector of trinkets and is
maybe
grumpy.
But like, where did his tremor come from? Right? Like outside of it's telling us that the dark force?
No, it's the dark side.
Dark side. I was like, the dark force. What am I talking about?
It's called the Force, but the dark
side of the Force. Right. Thank you. I'm like blanking on that for some reason. It's like literally what the book is about. The dark side of the Force is deteriorating his body, which is great, but like, show me that earlier. And I understand if people feel like I am just a resounding gong because I say this a lot, but it's how I look at books, and it's why I love world building. We want to feel like the characters are real, and part of how we do that as writers and authors is by giving characters multiple things that are vying for their attention. Because in your and my day-to-day, there's so many things that vie for our attention. And your wife needs something, your work needs something, you got to pick up milk as well because you want cereal tomorrow morning. Your dogs need to go out, they need to get walked. You've got to plan for that wedding that you're going to, next year or whatever. Oh, you got to record the podcast with Jonathan. There are things vying for your attention, and they don't need a lot of screen time per se in the book. But knowing that they're nudging at the person because they nudge at us makes the book come alive.
100%. I will say, though, his tremor was introduced in book 2 as, I think, the effects of the dark side.
It was? I don't remember that.
I forget exactly when in the book. I think towards the middle half of the second half. If that makes sense. So, a third of the way in, I guess. If the math doesn't check out on that. But later in the book, it gets introduced that he has a slight tremor.
Okay.
He's able to overcome it, and now it's getting worse and worse because of his persistent use of the dark side.
Fair enough. I'll concede to having forgotten that.
But it's not explained. If it's just this thing is happening. It's not given a specific origin.
Okay.
Oh, this happened, then this happened, and that caused his tremor.
Got it. All right, fair enough. Now that I've said all those things, I want to jump on the opposite side of the coin here and talk about all the stuff that I absolutely adore with Drew's writing style.
Oh, let's do it.
Why don't you go first?
I think one of the best parts of this book is something I talked about just a few minutes ago. The connections he makes to the whole world, character connections.
Yeah.
So we learn that daughter of the healer that was in book 1, then reappeared in book 2, was killed by Xana in book 2. The daughter of that healer, Caleb, is now a princess on a world.
That was unique. I liked that.
That's, being destroyed by mining. Yeah. Her bodyguard served with Bane in the Sith army. So there's these things that are moving and coming together for the final act of this book that are fantastically woven together. He does a good job establishing the world and the characters that he later ties back to the main plot and main characters. So the side characters is what I meant in the previous sentence. It's fantastic. He does a marvelous job with the world building and the character connections. Because if they're trite, you're like, oh, so this guy knows this guy, and now they're in a room together. It's an oversimplified example, but the connections are surprising and they feel real. Multiple planets involved that these characters are traveling, but to bring the third act of the third book together, he pulls it off. Goes back to that video game thing. Imagine this was 3 video games. And by playing Dynasty of Evil, you played the other 2 games. You spent 80 hours now, to use that number of 40 hours per game. You spent 80 hours with these characters, and now, 20 years later, 2 years after you play the previous games, you're like, holy crap, we meet these characters again.
Yeah.
Another gold star to Karpyshyn. He did a fantastic job.
Yeah, I really like how he puts a contrast as well between characters of Bane wants this, Xana wants this, and they're different, and you get to see the tension looking inward. Same thing with the princess, right? Like, he's weaving together a tapestry of characters and their wants and needs differently, and we get to see it kind of start to bubble over.
Right, absolutely. You have Bane. He's complaining about Xana not taking initiative in trying to kill him and take over. And then you have a reason for that given through Xana's POV saying, well, she was just waiting for the right time. She wasn't sure when to strike. She didn't know what he was planning. And she was watching him because she doesn't necessarily trust him. And then she realizes, crap, I should have struck earlier because now he's undermining me and probably looking for another apprentice, which all I was doing was preparing myself and trying to figure him out before I struck prematurely. So you have 2 point of views pitted against each other, and you understand why Bane's complaining, Grumpy Boomer Darth, and you understand why Xana didn't act when she was supposed to act, and you see Xana come to the realization, not that Bane is right, but that on her own, she should have struck earlier because now she's at a disadvantage.
Yeah.
So those things are well executed. Well done.
Yeah. Another, and this speaks to Drew's history writing video games, but he, it's hard to be consistent with your canon when it's this big. Like, Star Wars is a big intellectual property, IP for those in the know. But he establishes new power weapons and information and articles of power almost on a whim, where he's like, oh, there's an ancient dark Sith Lord who wasn't known before, and it could feel trite, but it doesn't. It feels authentic. It feels natural because you're like, well, it's the universe. I mean, there could be tons of stuff that we don't know about. Because Bane's stepping in when the Dark Sith group are kind of well-formed, and they've been around for a while, and there's been a few Darth Lords, and they've done their own research, and no one's really compiled it, but what's the name of that planet that he was on?
On the Outer Rim?
The one that he was on when he was with the Dark Army. Learning in book 1.
Ambria, I think, right? Or no, or Ambria is where
I don't know.
Caleb and the healer was.
Yeah.
But before Ambria, the world before
I thought it started
Ambria.
with a K. Matt will correct us.
Yeah.
Anyway, so the first planet he's on when he's learning to become a Sith. you think, okay, they've compiled most of the information, whatever. But then there's like this weird mining town that has found more amulets and rings. And then, this other place that has another holocron. And you go, okay, it could, again, it could feel trite. It could feel just like, oh, Deus Ex Machina. But it doesn't. It feels normal. And he even addresses, like, well, the reason this wasn't found is because the Jedi tried to wipe out this being, blah, blah, blah. Now, I'm going to say something I always say, which is I would like to know why the Jedi thought that that was important to wipe him out, or to validate or invalidate the claim. Like, maybe it's a red herring where Bane thinks that they tried to wipe it out, but frankly, like, it just got lost because his worshippers had infighting and destroyed some of the artifacts. Whatever it is, right? Like, could be anything. That said, he does a really good job at, like, hey, here's another powerful thing, and Bane's going to go find another trinket, right?
Absolutely. The planet you were thinking of where Bane was born on is a Patros.
No, not that one. It's not what he was born on. It was where he was trained as a Sith. Because they take him, because in the first book, he's trained, he's born on a Patros, and then he meets a Sith, and he's like, you've got dark energy, come with us. And then it's that
Korriban.
Korriban. Could be C, but whatever. Yeah, Korriban, where they had this library of information that none of the other Sith are reading. That's
right.
the one that I was...
The Academy.
Yeah.
The Brotherhood's Academy and Korriban.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to think of. Thanks. So, props to Drew, video game history, writing things, making, a 20-hour world, if you were playing a video game, come alive into a much more intricate and deeper way with books. And I imagine, and you didn't play Knights of the Old Republic, is that right? Okay.
No. I
imagine that, and this should be something we ask Matt, that if you've played the games and then you read the books, it feels more real, similar to how I feel about the Cosmere and Sanderson, where it's like, well, you've got this book and you're like seeing the connections because it's fun. Like, we love piecing mysteries together as people in between our stories and narratives, whether it's movies and books or books and video games. It's just fun for us as audience members.
And that's why I had so much fun reading this book and figuring out the connections as they came about. How Lucia, the princess's bodyguard, feels tension when Bane is in prison. They capture him by using a sedative, and the assassin they send to get him, he's using the sedative that Sarah prepared. And as they walk into the prison where Bane is being held, Lucia, the bodyguard, realizes who he is and the tension she feels, and that reveal, which is actually foreshadowed a little bit before if you're a careful reader, but the tension there where she's like, I love my princess, I would die for her. She thinks this man has done something terrible to deserve imprisonment, but he's the only person that ever cared for me when I was a Sith. So that is a hell of a plot point. That's great. That is a good tension.
Yeah. What were your initial thoughts when you saw this idea of Dark Jedi coming up?
Oh, I love that guy. He was fun. He seemed like somebody I would want to get to know more as a character, not like have a beer with him, but get to know more as a character. He seemed like a fun, flippant, doesn't care about anything. Life's a game. He's too rich for his own good. He's the rich guy who goes out robbing because he's bored.
Do you think that there are light Sith if there are dark Jedi?
Maybe.
I feel like there have to be.
It's a good question.
I feel like there have to be because beings, and I can't say humans because it's a multicultural universe, right? I feel like beings, if they are based on human emotions and perspectives, should open themselves up to, even if they're Sith, they might be convinced to lay down some of their passions, right? I really like the idea of Dark Jedi. I think that's kind of a fun, like, middle ground. Like, well, you were raised in the light, but you decided to go dark. But what if you were raised in the dark and you decided to go light? Similar to the bodyguard who was, raised Sith in the Sith army, fought with Bane a bit. She's not really fighting for the light. She's not fighting for the Jedi. That's something that came to mind while I'm like, oh, Dark Jedi, I wonder if there's light Sith,
I think there has to be, based on my own, biases, I'll admit. why wouldn't they be in this world? With my limited understanding of it, I still think that there could be. And I think based on what Matt has said about the Force,
Balance.
there
Yeah. I was
there
going to
has to
bring
be
that
a
up.
balance, and light Sith would be somebody with a propensity towards darkness, but somebody that keeps it in check. Whereas this guy, what's his name?
Siddharth?
Yeah, like Seth. His name is Seth or something like that.
I thought it was Siddhartha.
He has all the training and knowledge of the Jedi, but he has a propensity towards the dark. And so he is not full Sith, but he's not an honorable Jedi, at least not in the eyes of the rest of the Jedi. So
Siddharth. That's his name.
Seth Harth. So there has to be his equivalent on the Sith side.
I would think so, because Matt told us all about the Force and balance and his love of Darth Revan, which, I mean, I'm only halfway through the book, but Darth Revan hasn't been dropped at all yet as like a hark back to, right? If I recall correctly, Darth Revan was referenced in book 1 when he was in the library on Korriban, and Darth Revan was also seen in book 2 with the Rule of Two. So I'm kind of hoping for the pattern to continue and to see, perhaps some more information come out about Darth Revan. And I'm sure that Matt will encourage us to read it at some point. And maybe it's a good follow-up to this series as we add Darth Revan to the list. We'll have to discuss that later. But I think it seems relevant to be like an origin item to Darth Bane.
I think so. And maybe because of that, or just because it's the same world, same canon, it was recommended as the next book to read in Audible for me.
Oh, really?
So I put it in my wish list, but that could be a marketing ploy and not any real connections between the trilogies. But for the reasons you just outlined, I wouldn't mind reading it.
How did you respond when you saw that Hammerhead Jedi? I forget his name.
I forget all the Jedi's names. What did he do?
He's the Jedi that they went to visit who lives in a garden.
It just showed the ignorance and the pride of the light side.
Oof!
Where they actually thought that a one-armed, disheveled psychopath, from their perspective, wielding a lightsaber with one arm, is really the guy that took care of Caleb and another person and killed a bunch of Sith and killed a bunch of Jedis, and you assume that he's one-armed because the Jedi got him, but there's obviously the stump is like old and not a new wound, but you just assume that. That just seemed unthinking of somebody who's supposed to be enlightened and experienced as he's portrayed to be.
I would really be curious to see some corresponding novels of what's going on in the Jedi side of things during these exact time frames, because it does feel a little like, and I mentioned this at the end of Book 2, Rule of Two, it does feel like there's an immaturity in the light side in some sense. And I think it's certainly hubris, but there must be something going on that's making them act out in immaturity or simply just be immature, because at this point the dark side was immature as well, right? Like that's why Bane was able to restructure, just showing up to a Sith meeting. We're doing some restructuring.
Yeah.
We're going to need you guys to clear your desks. And
it was with a heavy heart, I have to inform they were letting some of you go.
Yeah, and I know we're family, but it's not going to end well for you.
We will not be giving out references.
And there is no severance in the normal way that you're talking about. There will be severing, but not severance.
You will be severed from us and from your body.
Severed forever and ever. Till severing do us part.
Into the dark void you go. Which is interesting. The dark void, I mean. Because jumping a little bit ahead in the book, Bane finds Lord Udedu's holocron, and he wants to live forever. And apparently, this dark Sith was able to jump bodies, and this holocron will tell you how to jump bodies, how to put your soul into somebody else's body. Mm-hmm. But you have to find somebody who's just right. This is like Goldilocks and the Three Bears, only this is Goldilocks and the
Bane and the three bodies.
Bane and the three bodies.
Bane and the three body problem.
You have to find a body that's just right. Otherwise, you'll get a bad body and you'll break somebody completely, and you'll be stuck in a corrupted body, or they will win against your intrusion into their soul, and you'll be flipped into the void, and that'll be an awkward meeting. Hey guys, how y'all doing? So about that thought bomb, sorry, not sorry? How does that work? Or is the void that big where Bane will be thrown in one of the other corners of the void and never see the hundreds of Sith he killed?
Clearly, Bane is going to try to take this information and make it work for himself, right?
Yeah.
Is that I feel like that's fair.
He's figured it out.
You haven't finished the book yet, right?
No, I'm on chapter 16, and he has just been abducted by, I think I'm at chapter 17, actually, but he's just been abducted by the men that Sarah has sent, along with the female assassin. And so he's just been captured, and right before he's captured, he's thinking to himself, awesome, I've accumulated all the knowledge I need, understand it 100%. I've absorbed it. Now I need to find a body. So as he's thinking this, walking through his door, he gets attacked and captured. If he escapes, which he will, because it's the book about Bane, even if he dies at the end, he at least escapes this prison. He's going to try to jump bodies, let's put it that way, to find himself another shell.
So who do you think that will be? Who do you think the shell will be?
Well, based on what I read in chapter 16 or 17, he'll probably search out somebody who is weak enough that he can control, but has enough connections to the dark force and is strong and evil enough physically and mentally for him to be like, yeah, this is a suitable shell. Maybe it's this dark Jedi, because Xana has taken the dark Jedi to go rescue Bane. They figured it out. No matter how careful those people were, they figured it out on which planet Bane could be. What do you mean could be? On which planet Bane is, and they're going there.
Yep. I think it's going to be the bodyguard. It can't be the Dark Jedi because Xana needs an apprentice. And although I think it would be a very fun storyline to follow where the Sith rule of two, they rotate back and forth by killing each other and jumping bodies and continually just kind of grow as powerful beings back and forth where one's the leader, one's the apprentice, right? I think that'd be an interesting story to follow. I don't think that's going to take place. So Xana needs a new apprentice. Bane needs a new apprentice. Bane gets captured. I'm not at 16 yet. I think I'm on 13. But he's going to jump bodies. Like, you don't get this new information introduced by a vetted author, a veteran author like Drew Karpyshyn, and then he doesn't try and do the thing that he learned, right? So he's going to try and jump bodies. I think it will be the bodyguard because she was in the Sith army with him. So she's dark enough, but she's also weak-willed enough that he could take her. That's my theory. That's
a good theory.
But also, like, Bane was supposed to find a new apprentice. So if he's not going to take her as a body, then he is going to take her as an apprentice.
From the publisher's note that I read earlier, which was the plot summary, there is a fight between him and Xana. So I don't think it's going to be the bodyguard. I think it might be the Dark Jedi, because Xana fights Bane, and I think the Jedi will be with her as she fights him. And the winner of that battle will take the Jedi as a new body or as an apprentice. That's what I think is going to happen.
Interesting.
But I haven't read far enough to...
Sure.
I'm confident in that. I'm very confident in my guess, but I haven't read far enough to know.
Love it. Well, tune in next time and find out which of us is right, wrong, and both wrong. Whatever.
Yeah. And the winner gets to sever the loser with a lightsaber.
Yeah?
Yeah.
That's what you want to do, is sever the other person?
In twain.
Half of us don't even know what that word means.
In two.
Uh-huh.
With a lightsaber.
Yes,
I
got
lightsaber.
That. If this were a not safe for work podcast, I would make jokes.
Yeah, getting marked as explicit. I thought about it a little bit. I just want to continue this conversation for another 25 seconds. Because we get introduced to Sarah and Lucia and the Dark Jedi, who's kind of an outlier in the sense that he's not connected to anybody else that we've known so far. The melding of these worlds, like three comets are coming at each other.
Yeah.
I am now more intrigued by the ending. Your question prompted some interesting thoughts, but I'll save them for when we find out next time, and I'll expand.
Well, let's do a quick recap. Let's do a recap, right? So we've got Bane is looking for extending his life because he doesn't think Xana can fulfill her role in the Rule of Two. Xana,
Right, and he feels that in his condition she might actually win, but she's not worthy of being a Dark Lord yet.
Right. So this is the recap I want to do. We want to look at each of the characters, what their current wants are, and how we think that's going to come together as the story progresses.
Excellent.
So that's Bane. Xana, we know, thought it wasn't the right time to take Bane on. Now she thinks she's getting dethroned, so she needs to go find an apprentice. And frankly, like, the Rule of Two should feel clunky because this has never happened before. So there's no evidence necessarily. What I would like to know, though, did Xana make a holocron for herself yet or no? Probably not because we haven't seen it. But
probably not.
I think that as someone who likes data, the Sith should be making holocrons because not all of their apprentices are going to survive. Anyway, so Xana is looking for an apprentice. She finds the Dark Jedi, Set Hearth, and the princess wants to take revenge on Bane. So she might be another good opportunity for an apprentice.
That's what I text you.
Did you text me that?
I text you that, yeah. I said, the princess's rage is interesting to watch unfold, and I said it might work against her, or maybe she'll be a cool new apprentice.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Fair enough. And then we've got the bodyguard who wants to protect the princess, but she could be used as either a pawn or she could be the body that Bane goes to, something of that nature. And then you've got the not bounty hunter. What is she? The assassin? The assassin.
Mm-hmm.
Who wants the challenge of taking Bane or Xana on. She doesn't know who. And I know that you're a couple chapters ahead of me, so you've seen this battle play out a little bit, which is fine. But now what does she want, right? She wants to take this back. She wants to get paid. But people who like a challenge aren't always just satisfied with getting their paycheck and cutting and running. And then you've got the king who wanted to try to resolve this issue with the Jedi. And the Jedi, who don't feel like it was resolved, but backed himself into a corner when the princess talked to him. So do you think we're going to get all of the loose ends tied up? Or is it just going to kind of zoom back in on Bane and Xana? And the Jedi stuff will fall to the side, the king will fall to the side, and the home world where these things took place will just kind of like become background noise and unresolved.
I think, well, first of all, good question. I think the king and the Jedi and Dawn politics are going to be left by the wayside because we're just walking through this part of the story. We're walking on Dawn, seeing these things unfold, but really, Dawn is the home of Princess Sarah, and she's one of the main foci here. So it's Princess that we want to know about. It's her bodyguard by proxy and because she's part of this world, the machinations that are going on, and the assassin because she's part of that triangle. So those three will get tied up. King stuff? No. Like, King might be mentioned that he's frustrated with Sarah. He might retaliate against Sarah, but his immediate issue with the Jedi might not get resolved, but might get more complicated because of Sarah's backdoor kidnapping of a Sith Lord. Because now there's a Sith Lord on their planet. It might backfire, and maybe it'll get tied up with Dawn getting annihilated, like the royal family getting destroyed and killed.
Mm-hmm. All right.
But I don't think the Jedi and the King of Dawn are going to have any pages dedicated to them working this out or not working this out.
Fair enough. I think Drew will throw in a couple bones here and there and give us at least a couple notes on it. But I would be interested in the timeline that happens after this book, which I won't bother looking up at this point. But maybe next episode you could tell us in some of your research which books are suggested next, not by Audible, by like Star Wars fandom, right? Like which book timeline would be best for that. So I'm excited to see where this pans out, and it's entirely possible that we do a few more looks at different Star Wars books. Probably not the own discovery of ourselves, but a little bit guided by Obi-Wan Matt and offshoot points from books that we read. I think Revan's a great jump off from this at some point, and then probably whatever's talked about in the Revan book could be there as well, as long as the curiosity is still provoked. Or we could just stick with Drew Karpyshyn's rundowns because we like him as an author. Like that's an option too.
I'm intrigued by Revan, so we probably should read that outside of Audible suggestion for me, because Matt and you and I talked about Revan. Some of it made it to the previous episodes, so I'm intrigued by that character. But I'm very happy for Matt to guide us in the way of reading the bound books of the canon that is Star Wars.
100%.
So you've asked me to guess on a few of the plot twist points, possibilities. Let me ask you something and take it a little bit to a dark turn. Who do you think dies? And I'm not talking about Bane or Xana. Do you think any of these side characters that we've come to be intrigued by and are now invested in their outcomes, who do you think dies? Do you think Dark Jedi gets his head lopped off? Do you think Princess Sarah is executed maybe? It's pretty high crime she committed, and she's married into the family. She's not blood.
That's a fair question. Oh man. It's really dependent on who Bane tries to take their body and who Xana tries to take as an apprentice, because Karpyshyn could do a plot twist where she originally tries to take the Dark Jedi Set. Bane takes over his body, then Xana needs to fight Bane in Set's body, and then Xana takes on the princess as the apprentice. It could go a few different ways. So
Well, the reason I bring this up, I'm not going to spoil anything, but currently where I'm in the book, all three are in the same planet, because I did kind of spoil one thing for you. Bane does get captured.
I knew that was going to happen, because when the princess gives the assassin a specific poison, it's like, you don't introduce this as an author unless it's going to happen, you know.
Yeah.
Most likely. I mean, you could introduce it and make it fail, but that just doesn't feel like good storytelling.
Right. So Bane, princess, assassin, bodyguard. At this point, because they flew off in a spaceship, not correct Star Wars terminology, but you guys know what I mean. They flew off in a spaceship back to Doan, and like a day later, Xana and Dark Jedi here, Set, have just returned. That's where I'm at in the book. So that's what prompted the question. The three of them are on the planet. What does Bane do? And who does he kill?
Right.
Well, it's fun guessing, and we will know next time exactly who's killed and who's not, and whose body is snatched or overrun by Dark Lord Bane. Or, who knows, maybe Xana will sever him in twain. But I'm excited. I really like this book. I'm not even reading ahead because I want to be surprised. And shut up, Jonathan, before you say I told you so. There's a better way to read books.
Uh-huh. I'm just telling you that it adds some mystery where we pause and we talk about it, and we have an opportunity to speculate and digest a little more of what the characters are going through and how they're feeling and what we see from the author's point of view and the narrative style and plot points and et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's just more fun this way as opposed to your way. So I guess, put simply, my way is better than your way.
The dark versus the light side.
Which one are you?
I'll take the dark side.
That doesn't surprise me. Why am I the light side? I mean, I know why I'm the light side, but I don't think the people know why I'm the light side.
Because it just seems like you would have a propensity towards Jedis and order and peace and tranquility. And
Okay.
I like gallivanting across the galaxies, pillaging. That's it.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I don't really have a response to that, so we'll just call that. We'll call it what we'll call it.
All right. Should we wrap it then?
I think that's the episode. Yeah. So thanks for joining us today, everybody. Next time we will finish discussing Dynasty of Evil before we have our resident Star Wars expert back to shed some light on all the fun details that we missed.
Take a moment and rate the show on your favorite podcast platform and share this with your book-loving friends. And we'll see you next time on SideQuest.